And today we are having this panel with the Black Sex Workers Collective sister organizations, Best Practices Policy Project, the Outlaw Project, Desiree Alliance, and New Jersey Red Umbrella Alliance. I think that's all of us. So with this session, we want to initiate some discussion and some insights into the innovation and success of HIV policy within sex worker rights. In this field, we often have a lot of success and others end up taking credit. So, that would mean that when there's HIV policy, that sex workers are left out of the conversation of being innovators and getting credit for such innovative ideas, thus not getting those high-level paying positions because we've been pushed out of the conversation. So we're going to have several panelists today, two of which are here, and we have some virtual panelists that are going to be attending as well. And unfortunately, due to xenophobia, some people could not make it here. So shout out to xenophobia for making it impossible for people in these key conversations to be here on this stage today. So we're going to start with the panelists, and then at the end, there's going to be Q&A. We only have about, 1 hour for this session? Is that correct? We only have 1 hour, so we can keep it, try to keep it brief as possible. But being that some of the panelists could not make it because of the immigration issues as well as some technical issues that they're having, we might have a little bit more time. So on the stage with me today is Z. I do not know how to say this last name. This is so embarrassing. Please say your name for us.
Hello, folks. My name is Z. Examaika. I am a consultant with the Best Practices Policy Project based in New Jersey, USA. And I work in sex workers' rights outreach. I do research on U.S. policies and do educational outreach for best practices as well as our sister organizations.
That's good.
Yeah, and I'm going to pass it to...
Wait. They're trying to take my shine. Do not take my shine, please. It's all about me right now. All right, so we had Z. We've got the illustrious Monica Jones. Can you just give us a brief introduction because there are others?
Hi, my name is Monica Jones. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm the director of the Outlaw Project, which is a intersectionality, housing justice, sex worker rights, trans rights, immigration rights.
Thank you. Not here today. I don't think they're going to be able to speak, but Beyonce Karungi from Uganda, Chris Sardina from Desiree Alliance, Olivia Green, who couldn't get her visa. Thank you, xenophobia. I'm going to keep calling that out. And Najela Ree. So we're going to start with, who wants to go first to give the wonderful audience the information on how amazing your work is? Oh, okay. Thanks. Monica Jones.
Thank
Round
you,
of applause.
Akina. Thank you so much for that. So as you know, my name is Monica Jones. And so when we talk about intersectionality and how it impacts sex workers and our work, and people take credit for our work, right? And so before we even talk about like HIV, STIs, we need to talk about the criminalization of condoms. And so many times in policy, sex workers been always talking about like, hey, decriminalize condoms, decriminalize this, decriminalize exchange of clean needles, decriminalize the selling of sex. And so many times we've been laughed out the room about that. And so now that is very important to talk about sex work. You cannot talk about sex work without HIV. So many people are taking credit for the work of grassroots organizations who are out there doing the work on HIV policy. And so my organization, the Outlaw Project, is pitting trans women and sex workers first on the policies and the problems that we face in our communities. So just like housing, my organization does housing, right? We talk about access to housing, and we know that like trans people in the United States face a higher, I love that they're protesting out there, and are really great. Yes. And so when our organization's doing housing, and what we do is say like, hey, trans women and women who engage in sex work face a higher eviction rate, especially now that, especially in Arizona, where people are moving from California and surrounding states to Arizona, that a lot of landlords are evicting trans women and cis women without no probable cause. They just say, hey, you're getting evicted. Are we going to raise your rent up $500, $600 next month? And so a lot of people are facing housing shortage, a housing crisis. And so what our organization said, like, we know that we have a little bit of money here, but what we're going to do is to move money to build a property where we have 2 units on there where we can house trans women. And this is very important because a lot of organizations say that, yeah, we're doing housing, but how many of those organizations are ran by Black trans women, right? They're for Black trans women, but they're not run by Black trans women. And so who knows what a Black trans woman needs other than another Black trans woman in that same situation? So we know that, like, hey, you might like to go party and you don't want to check in for 2 days. That's okay. Just let us know that you're okay, and when you come back, your place is still here. And a lot of times in other housing programs, without that knowledge and without that understanding that like how sex work works and how housing works and how it's like, hey, I might go disappear because I'm going to go party and do a bump and do a bowl, and I won't be here for 5 days, but I'll show back up sober. And that's what we need to understand, that like housing comes first, and then you take care of the other problems and the other issues. And so many organizations might say like, hey, we're offering housing, come here because we got this big grant. But many times those grants are not given to those grassroots organizations who know what trans women need and sex worker needs. And so that's how so many times that the work that we do is taken over by other organizations that do not have a clear understanding. They might heard us speak about it, then they say, oh, we're gonna write this grant on that because we heard. Or they might have us come and speak about a specific issue so that they can get the money. And so I think that's the biggest dilemma that facing that, like, we don't have the right to our creation or our programs that we innovate. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica Jones. So our next speaker is coming in from outer space, the virtual world. Chris Sardina of Desiree Alliance.
Hey everyone, my name is Chris Sardina. I'm the director of Desiree Alliance, and we're a national sex worker rights organization in the United States. One of the things, the reason we had this panel was because just a few months ago, sex workers have been working on getting mentioned in the national HIV and AIDS policy since 2010 here in the United States. And it's every 5 years that the policy comes out, and it's a 5-year action plan. And every year since 2010, when the plan came out, sex workers have been writing and requesting and then demanding that we be mentioned into the national strategy. This helps us get grants, this helps us get recognized, this helps us do the work ourselves that we do instead of for us, around us, by us, or, around, everything but us. And so this became a problem. And so in 2020, when the new strategy came out, I just actually crossed out the old director's name and literally crossed it out and put in the new director's name and sent in the 2015 request for sex workers to be on the national strategy. It was kind of a big fuck you to the NHAS, to PACHA, to the President's Council for AIDS. It was a big fuck you to other HIV and AIDS organizations that, yeah, we support you, but we're not going to really push for you to be in the strategy. And, I can't say that because in 2020, there were organizations around that specifically really advocated for us to be in the strategy. Well, lo and behold, we were mentioned in the strategy in 2020. And we're going to take credit for that because, no one else in sex worker rights had really been doing the national work that it takes to get put in the strategy. And finally, we got put in the strategy in 2020. That's the 5-year strategy. Although there was really nothing that said, what they were planning on doing, other than they mentioned us a few times. So, that's a big win. We're going to take that. That's a huge win. But on the other side of that, there was 4 groups that 2 of them were sex worker advocates. They won't say that they're sex workers. And I'm not going to out anyone. But what had happened is 4 groups, 1 HIV, 2 sex worker advocate groups, and 2 HIV and AIDS groups came out and literally stole our work, stole it flat out, didn't go around it, near it, by it. They flat out just put our links that we have worked for over a decade into their strategy so they could get into policy making, so they could get a seat at the table that we fucking built. And that's a problem. That is a problem. We called them out. The letter is on our website at DesereeAlliance.org. If you want to read how we called them out, we asked for a meeting. Two agencies wouldn't meet with us. 2 did. We asked them to change their internal policies so nothing like this could happen again. Don't take marginalized people's work, marginalized people of color's work. And especially in sex worker rights, when we're always put at the margins or, pushed back or somebody speaking for us. And so we asked them to change their internal policies so nothing like this could ever happen again. Unfortunately, nothing has come about that, and we're still demanding that. I just met with one of them and said, hey, what have you done about this? And so this is a big problem that we have in sex worker rights, where many have taken our work, this coalition's work, the people that you see sitting up there and the people you see virtual. This is our coalition, and this has been our decades-long work on getting sex worker voices out there. We have been big in HIV. We attend every AIDS conference. We present at every AIDS conference. In 2020, Desiree Alliance and this coalition that you see before you have hosted the virtual 2020 AIDS conference, or whenever it was, 2020, I think. So, just if you want to build upon our work, that's fine and wonderful, because that's what our work is, to build upon. But don't come out, and because sex worker focused is not sex worker led. I will continue that shout from the rooftops. If you're an advocate, then you let sex workers lead. if you call yourself an advocate. If you are working with sex workers, make sure that, they lead. So this is my big problem in sex worker rights, that we're getting a lot of people that aren't even sex workers that are speaking for us, around us, by us, and near us. And so this has got to stop. So that's pretty much my rant for the day. We continue to fight for sex worker rights and HIV and AIDS work, and we're very proud of what we've done. We've got decades of work that we have surrounded ourselves with in this movement. So, please look us up on our websites for HIV work and AIDS. And look at all of our websites, because we've been in this work for a long time, and we deserve to be recognized for our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. So for those who
You're
may
welcome.
have come in, I'm sorry, what was that? Oh. So for anyone who may have come in a little late, this is the Sex Worker Focus is Not Sex Worker Led panel. And we're here to encourage groups to not just have sex workers in the room, but listen to us and implement our strategies that we suggest and create. And as we're moving on with the panel, our next speaker is Z.
Hello, folks. Thank you, Akinos. So my colleagues have explained quite well the issues that arise when sex workers are not the authors of their own narrative. And that is, the movement then stops serving us and stops serving our communities. So I just wanted to talk about some of the steps that we can take and some of the steps that we have taken as a coalition or 5 organizations to make sure that sex workers, and not just sex workers, but sex workers of diverse backgrounds, of diverse experiences, and particularly those who are in more vulnerable positions, are given their rightful voices, not spoken for, but are being given space to speak. So one of the big things that we struggle with is the idea that sex workers are somehow incapable. We come up a lot, and anyone on this stage can tell you that when we write a grant, when we go into a room, even though the person writing our grant has over 2 decades of experience and a PhD, she is infantilized when we put that we are sex workers and we are doing this project. Now, our organizations run on small budgets, and we do great things. We support our communities, we provide mutual aid, we provide emotional support, we provide educational outreach. And I say this not as a brag, but to say that even with society doubting us and telling us that we are incapable and incompetent, we have managed for decades to keep our communities, not just keep our communities alive, but raise the next generations of activists to continue the fight. And that is something that needs to be recognized going forward if we are ever supposed to achieve the goal of decriminalization of sex work or decriminalization of HIV, in which sex workers are and should be front and center. So I will not take much longer. I feel like I have made my point. So I will yield my time.
Thank you, Z. So for any amazing funders and other people working with sex workers, but maybe you're not sex workers, please remember that in order to push this movement forward, we have to really consider the different contributions that these grassroots organizations give, regardless of where they are in the funding bracket. So there's a lot of work that people are doing, as Monica was saying, to kind of chime in on that, with limited budgets. And that work is very important, and we should be honored for that work, and we should be paid when there's a possibility to be paid for that work as well. So as we move on, despite our technical difficulties, we're going to pass the mic on to, who are we calling you today? Because last week you were Solomon. Your names change every week. Aha, are you? Yes, the greatest. If you don't know, you should find out. Google her. She's absolutely amazing. This is the great Dr. Penelope Saunders. That isn't a joke. This is a genius here. Google.
This is not the chicken crossing the road joke. We still had the joke about the prostitution bill being before Parliament, but I guess you'll never hear that joke now. So I am just going to introduce some issues quickly and then throw it to my colleague, Erica. And we're really transitioning this to the Q&A. So get your questions ready for us. And I guess you come up to the mics and ask them, or people online, I have a screen and you can send them to me. I'm not sure what access Erica has. But to give you a bit of background, I was part of a group founding an organization in the District of Columbia called Different Avenues, and Erica was deeply involved in Different Avenues. And that was a grassroots service provider for people who were engaging in sexual exchanges, and some identified as sex workers, some didn't. That's how far our work goes back. And then out of Different Avenues, we formed Best Practices Policy Project, which takes up the space of ensuring that across the United States, and now to a degree in some parts of the world, sex workers' voices are heard as leaders in policy. And I would like to throw a resource your way to read after this session is over, and it's called Nothing About Us Without Us. It was published in 2015. It's up on the Best Practices website. It was our colleagues, Shamus Outlaw's final report that she wrote with all of us as a group in 2015. And it gives you a series of recommendations to how to ensure that sex workers, in particular, trans sex workers of color, are present and leading. It's not just enough to bring all of our communities into the room and then say we were consulted. You need to give us the top jobs. And that might sound scary, but guess what? We do an excellent job. So Nothing About Us Without Us is the way to give us, we're getting some love from our colleague in the audience. It's the way to give us the leadership roles. And since we published Nothing About Us Without Us, something has changed. I realized that Nothing About Us Without Us is still asking to be invited in. It's the table that you said that you built. Guess what? As Chris Sardina says, we built the table. So I've changed the slogan to, without us, you have nothing. You don't even have the table, because we built the table. And what happens is history moves on, weeks move on, and it's as if we didn't build the table. Guess what we did? Sex workers were there at the beginning of the pandemic, providing services, providing money through our economic activities, and organizing, always there at every rally, Stonewall, everywhere. And so it's not nothing about us without us. Change your mind. Without us, without sex workers, the HIV/AIDS movement really doesn't have a lot. The communities built this. So that's my introduction. I'd like to introduce my colleague Erica. And one of the important things about Erica being here is that behind the scenes, even though we're a small organization, we provided the technical support that allowed people to be here. So Erica, anything you want to add about getting people here or the policy work that we're doing, I throw it to you.
Hello, I'm Erica. Excuse me. I'm Erica with Best Practices Policies Project. we went through a lot of measures to get people to this conference, and also with best practices policies. We do a whole lot of outreach in HIV and AIDS prevention. We also do a lot of mutual aid. And sorry, I'm kind of shy and I really don't know what else to say right now.
Okay.
But Najela just said she's here so she can present her part.
Hey, thanks, Erica. And that's really what we're here, doing a lot of the technical support to get all the speakers here. So Najela did come back? Okay,
Yes.
there you go.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I was here the whole time. My boob had clicked off my mic. So I'm Najela Ree, and I am from New Jersey Red Umbrella Alliance, and we are a group that is sex worker led, and we are also led by BIPOC and trans leaders, and we're an alliance of activists that are dedicated to promoting, defending, and advocating the human rights of sex workers in the state of New Jersey and beyond. And one of the biggest things that we want to make known is recognizing the violence and other forms of human rights violation that stem specifically from the criminalization and stigmatization that sex workers are subjugated to. And this happens whether the type of sex work they engage in is legal or not. So how New Jersey RUA hopes to combat this violence is through public education, documentation of the actual lived experience of sex workers, and community organizing for decriminalization. What makes decriminalization so important is because the same policies that are erected to criminalize sex work and basically make bodily autonomy and human rights illegal for those that engage in sex work are the same policies that turn around and criminalize HIV. It's the same policies that criminalize and support prohibition for drug users. And all those policies boil down to is making sure that there's going to be a class of unpersons, whether those are sex workers, whether those are people living with HIV/AIDS, whether those are people that are drug users. The fact that these experiences get criminalized, it really cuts off a sizable group of people that come from many marginalized existences and makes them unable to participate in democracy. It creates felons. It creates things like 3 strikes law that will basically mean if you get arrested on certain charges only 3 times, you are now property of the state for the rest of your life. So the fact that there are laws like FOSTA SESTA or that make consensual sex work and sex trafficking, they treat them interchangeably, which is horrifically dangerous because it ignores the fact that consensual sex workers can also be trafficked. These laws and also state laws that add felony enhancements to the crimes of, having condoms, the crime of exchanging sex for money or housing, the crime of, loitering while being trans. These are all anti-sex work laws that make it's so much more difficult to create a public that is not afraid to combat HIV/AIDS. Because if you are a sex worker who get arrested and they find out that you have HIV, now suddenly it can be seen as a felony, and that's going to be tacked onto your charges. So that now discourages those that are, usually getting tested very often from including an AIDS test on their panel, because that knowledge now makes them even more of a criminal. And you had cases like New York City where they were using condoms as evidence to charge you with prostitution. So when I was dancing in New York, this is way back when, I would be afraid to have condoms on my person, no matter what I was using them for. Because if I'm walking out of a club and they want to accuse me of illegal activity, they could say, oh, well, you have these prophylactics, and that's evidence. So if we don't combat this criminalization, I'm afraid of a world where, they will look at somebody and say, oh, well, you had a prescription for PrEP, and now we've arrested you for, any type of sex work related crime. And now that's even more of a felony, making HIV, having that status as a sex worker be in and of itself a crime, is not just immoral, but it makes it so those persons can no longer, especially in the United States, participate in democracy itself. And that is so scary, because going back to the theme of nothing about us without us, if we can't participate in the laws that govern us, how can we change them to make our communities safer?
Thank you.
Can I piggyback with something that what Najela said?
One moment, Chris. One moment. So we're getting ready to go into the Q&A portion as well, but okay, we're getting ready to go into the Q&A, and yes, Chris, we'll give you a moment to chime on to what Najela said. I just want to, before we go into that, I just want to make 2 more points before I pass it on to the great doctor who's sitting to my right. Groups get funded and offer small stipends to sex workers to fulfill certain roles in their campaign for diversity. So I want to encourage anyone here that may work with some groups to make sure that the sex workers that you're bringing in are also getting paid to do the labor just like the executives are. It's only fair, it's only right. Additionally, this conference could not exist, as previously stated, without the work that this community has done. So what would really be awesome in the years to come is if we, as sex worker-led spaces, could be included in the main conference as well. Because I love how they chuck us in the whore zone, which is great. We love being with the sex workers and other whores. But the fact that we're always in this space is very indicative of the culture outside. And we're always like put into the corner and not given to the main stage so certain populations can witness our greatness. Thank you. So Dr. Saunders, and you can pass it on to Chris if you'd like, or whatever.
I will. And I want to let you all know that there's even one more string to our bow, and that is Janet Duran of New Jersey RUA on Twitter is live tweeting this session, we hope. So shout out to Janet and follow at NJRUA. And I would love for you to bring up your questions to the mic now. Erica can see the chat. She's going to read out any that she sees, any questions that she sees. And while we're waiting for you to bring up your insightful questions or perhaps insult us from the audience or whatever it is that you want to do, I mean, we'll take your check later for the insulting if you want to insult. Oh, I see a hand. But Chris, I'll throw it to you for some additional comments.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what Najela said regarding the HIV laws and sex work, many states have laws that are 1980s enacted. And this is something that, sex workers have been a part of in the modernization movement of getting some of these HIV laws that criminalize you, that getting them off the books. Getting a law on the books is a lot easier than getting them off. Some of the things like spitting and not having a condom, non-disclosure of your status. When we're in 2022 and science has come a long way since the 1980s. So this is something, that sex workers in the U.S. have been trying to do, is get involved in that, getting the modernization movement and HIV. It's not a crime to get them out. But also things like you're put on the sex offender list for the registry for the rest of your life in some states. In California, they actually have when Najela talked about the 3 strikes law, a lot of states no longer, it used to be the same 3 felonies for the same crime would put you in for life. Many states have revised that to where it doesn't matter if your 3 felonies are related or not, you could be put in for life. In many states, HIV and sex work is still a felony. In California, they actually have what you call a wobbler. And that is if you already have felonies on your record, you can be put on for an ordinary misdemeanor can now be considered a felony to make sure that now you've got 3 strikes, you're going for life. So one of the things, that we try really hard is to get the states to understand that sex work, now if you're undetectable and you can't transmit it, disclosure is something that should be taken off the books. I used to have a problem with it, but since we're in 2022 and we have so much science available now that it is almost impossible if you're taking your medications to transmit HIV. So this is something that we really need to work on, is the criminalization of HIV and how that overflows into sex work.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to say tomorrow at 1:45.
Girl.
Don't please. At 1:45, if you want to hear more about the Tiny Home Project, I will be on the main stage with my colleague, right there, Natalie, to talk about the tiny homes and at the scavenger hunt, where there is 3 prizes you can win. You can win an Apple tablet, a Samsung tablet, and an Amazon tablet. Thank you.
So we'd really love to hear from you. I'm not seeing any questions here. Erica, do you have any questions in the chat? Anything available yet?
We have a question.
They can stand up.
Oh,
No,
wait. We got someone. Come on up. Sorry, Erica.
No problem.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing the work that you've done. And it is also exciting to hear that there's a best practice policy that I think the reason we're here is to share the lessons learned and also experiences that we can then take that kind of work and adopt it in our countries. The reason I'm standing is to attest to the testimony presentation that has been made around the police officers using the condom to arrest the sex workers. Therefore, I think we should then arrest everyone who's carrying the condom, because those are things that I think sex workers are facing out there. But at the same time, this platform, it is about to make sure that how do we prevent the HIV from spreading. So I would really want the IAS people that are in charge there to kind of like, put and donors that are funding the prevention safety material, condoms, lubricants, and all those kind of things, to kind of like have a word, I think, because I feel like the key populations are just made businesses. Because you see, today I'm putting my condom in my forehead, and I want to see if I can be arrested today. You see, so how are we going to prevent the HIV then if we are then, while I'm walking on the street and then I'm asked by the police to empty my bag because they've asked, are you a sex worker? I'm saying no. Then when I'm emptying my bag, and then if condoms come out, and then it's used as evidence. But then when you get to a custody or police station, then it's another story. So that has to come to an end. We want the donors to have a resolution with the subs in our countries to say, we cannot arrest sex workers or use any persons to be arrested for using a condom, because we want also to fight the HIV, but also we feel that the SAPS is another part of the government that is also, making use of arresting to meet the stats, because they're defeating the mandate of the Department of Health, which is to prevent the HIV. At the same time, they're also defeating the mandate of the WHO, which is to reach the 1995 goals. How are we going to get there? Under the criminalization system, this is the punitive laws that has marginalized the key population for a very long time, and I think it's high time that it comes to an end. We're calling for the decriminalization of adult consenting, voluntary self-identified sex workers in our countries, so that we can be able to carry our condom freely, because we also want to work for our families and to save lives with this business that we're doing. Thank you so much.
Z, go for it.
I thank you so much for that assessment, and I just wanted to point out that it's not a coincidence that these experiences are ubiquitous for sex workers within the world powers, the so-called developed world, and the developing world, or whatever pejorative has been coined to inferiorize the global South. Because we have to acknowledge the culpability of Europe and North America in exporting these oppressive policies as riders in their aid contracts, and as stipulations for receiving aid that smaller countries depend on. So one thing that we have is that the U.S. Forces aid recipients to sign an anti-prostitution pledge that all but shoots in the leg the effort to enhance and restore the dignity and agency of sex workers that these organizations are supposed to be serving. So when a small organization, in a developing country, or when a government in a developing country decides to take a progressive stance, there is still the specter of the U.S. coming to them and telling them that no, your policy is too progressive. Your policy is a threat to the standard that we have established. And I think, if anything, my sibling, that the IAS can do and that these big NGOs can do, they can stand up to North America and Europe in these oppressive policies and these anti-sex work policies.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I don't know if anyone else has any more questions, but as we wait for this beautiful young thing over here to ask the question, and that.
It ain't no question.
Oh, the comment, okay.
The comment.
Okay, make the comment, baby, make the comment.
I have to go pack up the merchandise thing, but I just wanted to say, Swap Hamilton here to say that we look up to y'all, inspirational. Everyone needs to be listening to Black trans women doing this fucking work. Black women, Black sex workers, listen, listen, listen. And you do amazing work. Just saying that. Thank you, and keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Swap Hamilton. To kind of chime in on that a little bit, I want to say that it's important for all of us to know these anti-sex work organizations, they actually make millions and millions of dollars off the backs of sex workers. So what they actually are doing is that they hijack our language and our movement, and they reframe that to get millions because, you know, everybody is obsessed with sex and they don't know how to deal with it. So it turns into these anti-sex work laws and regulations and things of that nature. So what we should do collectively, like everyone in this room, if you're down for this action, is maybe we can get together and like hijack their funders and try to take their funders and get some money for actually doing the sex work. Next comment or question.
Hi, I'm from Maggie's Toronto, and I guess I'm sorry, I'm not used to mics. What I'm curious about is actually what you're just speaking to, the incredible lobby that exists, the alliances that exist in the state through capital, like the money that gets made in oppressing sex workers, you know what I mean? And because a lot of the time that doesn't often get talked about, and it's something I'm really curious about understanding globally, like the amount of money that goes into the anti-trafficking industrial complex and so forth. So I guess any insight on that and how that might, or like any pushback have you noticed, you know, in the work that you've done?
Desiree? Yes. So, when I was at Arizona State University, there was like this terrible program called Project Rose. And it was a combined effort of the Phoenix Police, the prosecutor's office, and other nonprofits such as Catholic Charities, which runs their diversion program, right? And so the prosecutor office was invested, the police office was invested into this program, and so and also the School of Social Work, ASU, which is this billion-dollar university, right, was very invested in the arrest of sex workers, right? And why were they invest in the arrest of sex work? Is because when they moved downtown to downtown Phoenix, they gentrified the areas where sex work and trans women made their living. And so they heavily police that area. And that's the reason why these nonprofits who are anti-traffic exist, is to do the work of these larger business and universities, because they don't have what we have, right? They don't have like the guts to say like, yes, we are proud to do this work, right? And we are therapists, we are healers, we are those things that come with sex work. Sex work is not just sex, it is an emotional labor that we do, and we give pleasure. And so when they conflate trafficking and sex work, they use our language, like Akina says, they use our lived experience to sell the narrative of trafficking victims. And what they use, the pictures they use, are white women crying, white guilt, white fragility. And so they use that to criminalize Black, Latinx, migrant sex workers, and across the world, right? And so these condoms as evidence impact directly Black and brown bodies, right? The most people who are directly impacted by HIV, these condoms as evidence directly impacts us and puts us at a greater risk for HIV.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry. Is that okay?
Actually, we'd love to hear your question, but Najela also wanted to respond.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But we would love to hear your second question. Najela, do you want to respond now or wait for the second question?
I can wait.
Okay, so go ahead.
My second question is, like, I've been a sex worker my whole life. Now I'm a parent, so that's something that I really care about. Like, in terms of the criminalization of sex working parents and in any of the advocacy that's been happening, especially related to like HIV status, because in Canada, the way that our laws work, it's not technically illegal to be a parent who does sex work, but there's all these other kinds of ways that are used to criminalize sex working parents. So I guess I wanted to ask that's my last question.
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
I guess in the work that's being done in supporting sex working parents, what are some of the challenges that have come up in terms of the criminalization?
Well, one thing I would say is we know that legally it's a challenge, but several of us are parents and grandparents, so it's inherent in our organizing to create space for children, you know. That's just part of our organizing. But I know there are some policy issues as well. But I'm going to throw this to Najela, who wanted to answer perhaps your previous question, and then we can come back and talk about the policy issues of parenting. But as an overarching statement, what we're all talking about here is how whorephobia operates, right? You can't be a parent. You're not to be trusted with money, not to be trusted with a good job. You're not leading policy. So we're all focusing in on the operation of whorephobia in regards to our discussion. So, Najela, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think I have something to say about both of those things, even though, full disclosure, I am not a parent. But your first question, I wanted to talk about my experience with the Not Your Rescue Project hashtag, which was something that we did to combat the, rescue lobby in the United States and the world, because basically the biggest issue that I had when I created or helped create this hashtag was that the actual voices of those with the lived experience as sex workers were not being valued by these lobbyists. It wasn't being valued by those that created this industry where they were rescuing us by arresting us. They were rescuing us by making it so we couldn't get housing, so that we would lose our children in family court. And we needed to amplify those voices. And I think that's such an important facet, is documenting to the public at large, because it cuts through stigma. And just being on social media networks like Twitter and Tumblr before the Not Your Rescue Project hashtag popped off and after, it's been amazing to see how many civilians are now saying, oh, prostitute isn't the correct term to use. That's a criminalizing term. It's a stigmatizing term. They prefer to use the term sex worker. And seeing more people comfortable with just recognizing our humanity enough to use our preferred terms, I think we have made a little bit of a tiny change that makes it so these lobbyists are not the only game in town. Like, they can't, or they no longer have that ability to just completely steamroll our voices, because we have bared witness to our own lives. And
Hey, Najela, we actually have to close the session now. So
I'm so
I
sorry.
thought I'd wait for a moment where it was a good to narrate our own lives. If you want to finish, then we'll throw it to Akinos to close the session.
Oh, I think I said what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. And I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time. I am a sex working parent, and the Black Sex Worker Collective was pretty much built on a lot of my life experiences as being a parent and being pretty much criminalized and demonized by the Just Us system because I was an adult entertainer since I was 17, nonetheless. So there's a whole lot of conversation to be had around that, and now trying to support other sex working parents to navigate the system and figure out how to deal with that. But I wanted to close out on a couple of things. But first, I want to say thank you to all the panelists today. Thank you to Monica, to Z, Erica, Chris, Najela, Dr. Saunders. I want to close out by saying to sex workers in the room, be careful not to adapt the behaviors of the oppressors, not to be influenced by that. Make sure that we give each other credit for the work and the contributions that we are doing to this movement. And additionally, allow each other to be paid, including yourself. You're supposed to get paid for this work. This is hard work. It actually is work. Document all of the contributions as well that you put from your life as well as into this movement. And if you want to learn more about our groups, we can all be found on social media. If you go to the bswc.org, you'll be able to find all of the links to all of the groups. Make sure that you volunteer, donate, dismantle oppression, and in order to continue giving sex workers credit for the work that they do, use the hashtag #SexWorkersDidThat whenever you know that sex workers did something amazing. Thank you.